All right, guys. I'm super excited. Will's here. You guys have built probably one of the most popular applications on Lightning Network and have a whole bunch of cool backstories and kind of views on the world. So thanks so much for coming in and talking about all this.
Pomp, it's good to be here. Happy to talk about full Lightning. I think we're going to have a good con.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing before we get started, Will told me that he got engaged last year, and so we were swapping notes on the wedding planning, which is now going to become a thing in my life. So we'll see how this goes.
It's important to share what you learned for those coming after you. It's it's an adventure. So happy to share.
Most adventures in life I look forward to. Describing wedding planning as an adventure, I don't know about. We'll see.
It's one that you're going to try to hide from, but you got to take it head on.
All right. Let's talk about your background kind of before you got into crypto, Bitcoin. What were you doing kind of pre all of that?
So I'm based out of California. I've spent a lot of time down in Silicon Valley. My main focus has been building companies in payments, retail, consumer space. Started a company, building payment processing, kind of subscription stuff. And then moved quickly into building out systems for Google Store to launch that, and so had a really wide variety of building companies myself, being embedded in some of the large Silicon Valley stuff down there that I've got to learn quite a bit from, but really coming to Bitcoin was one of the best decisions I could have made.
For sure. You remember the first time you ever heard about it?
Oh yeah, I was living down in Argentina. I was down there for about a year, and there was a family party at the family that I was staying at, and one of the cousins was a security engineer down there, and this was maybe 2011 or so. And he was telling me about this thing called Bitcoin, and he was extremely bullish on it very early on, and that was pretty much the first time I heard about it. Now I've since kept in contact with this guy. Argentina's gone through a couple defaults since then, and he not only has weathered that storm, but come out pretty well. And so, like, the idea Bitcoin safe haven asset in turbulent economies was just a use case that just hit me right over the head.
Yeah, we had Camilla Russo, who's writing a book on Ethereum. She was a reporter at Bloomberg, kind of 2011, 2012 timeframe, and she was one of the first people to talk about Bitcoin at Bloomberg because she was covering the Argentina markets.
Yep.
And a bunch of traders and everything. They were talking about it. What was it like living in Argentina?
Let's see. Oh my God, it's a crazy city. It is one of those places that is a little bastion of Europe in the middle of Latin America. I had no idea what was going to be there, and so of course I land in a house full of tango dancers, and so when you get into a situation like that, you're going to see the heart of Argentina, and so I had a pretty incredible experience. Hope to go back soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, so living in Argentina, hear about Bitcoin, don't do anything at the time?
No, this is just starting to follow it, kind of from a curiosity standpoint. I came back, and I had some other experiences. I'm from Sonoma Valley, where we had a big migrant worker population, and I was active in building out local services for them, housing, legal aid, and so we would bring people in to talk about and provide new services for these migrant workers that are coming in that are typically not paid attention to. And we had one guy come in and present on Bitcoin as a remittance tool. Which again was one of those things. Okay, borderless payments, unstoppable, censorship resistant use case, and it was another one of those. It was like, okay, it's coming up again. This is rearing its head, and so it took about 3 or 4 major moments of experiencing it before I started to not only basically started to put skin in the game, start to follow it, not only from a kind of intellectual standpoint, but start to follow the development and take a deeper look.
For sure. And then, so as you're going through that, you're obviously paying attention and building payment technology, et cetera. At what point do you decide, like, hey, maybe actually I want to go build in the space?
So about 2 years ago is when I actually dove in and was actually starting to build. Before then, I had been building peer-to-peer marketplaces. How can you take two strangers, bring them together and exchange a car, exchange a home? So essentially, how do you have a big bag of cash and a very expensive asset and bring two people who don't know each other together and somehow come out with a happy transaction on the other side. And of course, there's issues of trust, safety, and when you look at just even the payment tools that we have at our disposal, most of them aren't necessarily built for that. They're built for an intermediary to be there. And so there were I would constantly be working in payments and retail, start to see the bounds of where our existing infrastructure kind of doesn't support these use cases and kind of starts to fail. I mean, I think it works in a lot of cases, but in some things, global transactions, trust-based peer-to-peer payments are some of the areas where it was immediately clear that Bitcoin or technologies like it could present new solutions that would open up new opportunities, new industries. And so I started to really focus on that.
Got it. And then maybe talk through a little bit kind of the idea for Fold and how you guys got started and what that original vision was like.
Yeah, I mean, so, Fold really started off as Bitcoin is growing. There are more and more people with it. And, when they have this, the idea is to show its use cases in the real world, besides just, hodling, and which is essentially a private action that takes place kind of on an individual level. There was, an idea of, okay, what other use cases this, and so payments was a thing that people talked a lot about. You got to buy that coffee. And so Fold was originally built to enable someone to spend Bitcoin and get their coffee. And so, the success of that originally was that it provided a new social moment for Bitcoiners to show people around them in a real environment, hey, look, I'm using this in the real world. It's a real thing. It's tangible. And for a lot of people trying to wrap their heads around a new asset, a new type of money, a transactable currency is something that's important to them, even though what we've come to learn is that the narrative has gone much farther with what Bitcoin can do and be. And so, besides the ability to show, hey, friends, I just, bought my Starbucks, we quickly learned that, as Bitcoin stood was just not going to be a transacting layer on chain. 10-minute confirmation times means that you're going to piss a lot of people off in the Starbucks lines. High fees depending on congestion, $5 fees on a $5 coffee. It just became obvious that everyday transactions and small payments were just not going to happen on chain. And so we knew that we had to kind of evolve with the narrative of Bitcoin, move with that, and that layer 2 is where this use case was going to grow, if it was going to grow anywhere.
And so I guess the key piece to all of this was like in the early days of Bitcoin, like how did people actually, drive adoption? It was literally, hey, pull out your phone or get your computer, let me get you a wallet and I'll give you some Bitcoin.
Yep.
Right. It was this kind of virality of money, if you will, was how a lot of early Bitcoiners came into the ecosystem. So they heard it from somebody, then that person said, let me give you some. And so it's a form of skin in the game, right? Because now I have this asset that I own that has monetary value to it. People pay attention, and then you're hoping that they then meet somebody else, tell them about it, and then they go ahead and they give them some Bitcoin, and it kind of goes on and on and on, and spreads to eventually millions of people.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, what we've seen is that moment of that giving moment had both skin in the game, that you actually got people holding the asset, which is number one. What we've come to learn is one of the most important hurdles to get over. Just give people some Bitcoin. Give them some ability to watch the price action, watch number go up, watch it go down, and start to harden them in that way and just build their curiosity about that. The other part is early days Bitcoin. It was a friend showing another friend. So there was this other element of this viral network of trusted friends, family that were just kind of spreading this gospel, spreading this word. And so it had this viral element, but also this kind of built-in trust with having someone you knew refer it to you. And it was kind of a secret that was being told to you. And so it had this, at that point, there's limits to how much that style of virality can grow. And so what we've done at Fold and what I've been trying to focus on is how do we expand these ways of mimicking this virality. And ultimately is what we've seen over the past years is people tapping into existing industries, existing mechanisms of essentially money transfer, and start to flow that into Bitcoin. And so for us, rewards is a big thing. If all the rewards in the U.S. were, instead of being distributed in airline miles and points, given as Bitcoin, 16 million Bitcoin would have been distributed to people around in the United States alone. So we start to see how we can take these existing behaviors that people do every day and kind of rework them in a way that doesn't make people change their behaviors, but gives new flows of Bitcoin to distribute it to more people in shorter amounts of time.
Yeah, and really the way that I think about kind of the adoption of a lot of this stuff is when people come in through price speculation, right? So prices going up or going down, and people are coming in because they look at it as a tradable asset. That's a very different track or path to follow, and you come at it from a different perspective than if I earned the Bitcoin or somebody gave it to me, and with the understanding that it's money and I'm to spend this at some other point, right? Yeah. And so I think a lot about, like, if you bifurcated the Bitcoin adopters today, let's call it 70 million people, right? 1% of the world's population, give or take. What percentage is the speculators, right? And here is, hey, this is a trading asset, versus the people who are here to use it as a currency and a purchasing mechanism. I think we would all agree, like, there's a lot of speculators, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the work you guys are doing, it almost feels like, one, you're trying to bring new people in to have them come in as that, hey, this is money, this is payment technology, etc. But two is you actually can pull some of those speculators over and kind of have them cross over into, you can use this as money as well, right? Yeah. So you can kind of attack it from both sides.
There's no doubt that right now, primary use case, the most people using it are using it for speculative purposes, and the hodlers. I mean, essentially, the way I think about it is that, once the first Genesis block was mined, the rudimentary technology to support hodling and the accumulation use case of Bitcoin the technology was pretty much there. Send, receive, and just wait it out. And so for us, it's really about looking at the new use cases to expand what we understand Bitcoin to be. And for the most part, the idea of earning and spending, the infrastructure just has not been there. It has not been possible to deliver a user experience that is at the expectation of mainstream consumers. And so for us, it's really about pushing at the protocol layer, at the application layer, to start to test out that experiment of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, but also to make it easier to earn. With Fold, it's not just about spending Bitcoin. It's about earning it when you're using your credit card, when you're using your USD, your fiat. And the idea is that we get to start get that curiosity, the people that aren't there to speculate, that honestly get turned off by exchange environments where there's red numbers flaring, green, it's stressful, it's confusing, it's expensive at times, and the utility is not necessarily immediately available to them. And so for us, it's about building the infrastructure to help people learn about this asset slowly, start to accumulate Bitcoin. They don't have to spend it, they don't have to have it. And they start to see this, and the average user is about 500 satoshis or 500,000 satoshis a month right now. And so what we see is people start to learn about it. And then we get support tickets coming in saying, hey, do I spend this Bitcoin, or am I supposed to hold it? What do I do with this? And so what we've essentially opened up is just an education machine for how to bring in people who haven't had experience with the asset, don't necessarily know what it is, but are there to learn about it. And so with Fold, what we're trying to do is create all these moments of education. What is a wallet? What's the best wallet for you? How do you think about spending it? We are totally here for the use case of accumulation, hodling, and everyone on the Fold team fits that bill. But we also know that there are very real use cases for around the world of spending it, using it in their daily lives, and we also are enabling that as well. And we're doing that through incentives, not just telling you should do it.
For sure. So let's talk about, what's the functionality available to me as a user of Fold today?
So Fold, available App Store, Android Store. Download
all mobile?
All mobile.
Okay.
We started off on the web, but we're primarily focused on mobile. So you download the app, sync your credit card, debit card, And then from there, we have right now currently 30 different merchants available: Amazon, Starbucks, Uber. And you go about spending like you do. You know, every day you're ordering coffee, you're ordering a car, you're making your Amazon shipments, and instead you do that with Fold. And what you do is you buy essentially prepaid credit into these stores. So you go into Amazon, buy $100 of credit, which is automatically loaded into your Amazon account, and from there you're going to earn 2 to 4% back in satoshis instantly. Now on your next purchase, you can decide, hey, I'm going to increase my spending power and use that Bitcoin to supplement my next purchase, or you can save it, accumulate it. And the idea is that we both accept credit cards, but we also allow you to spend Bitcoin via Lightning. And so one of the points of education that we have is that if you're spending with Bitcoin, you're going to get 3 to 4% higher, more cash back per transaction. So the idea is you can kind of imagine what's happened with Cash App. You look at Cash App, and it is the #1 financial app in the App Store. And in front of all of these mainstream consumers who may have never heard about Bitcoin, there is an entire tab about Bitcoin, teaching them about it, exposing them to that. And so the idea is that we're not beating you over the head about what to use Bitcoin or what how you should be using it, but we're giving you an on-ramp to start to learn more about it and to take the next steps of actually starting to actually use it and get onboarded into wallets, into the infrastructure, because there are behavioral changes of using Bitcoin versus what you might imagine with a credit card or something like that.
Yeah, and the way that I take what you guys are doing, right, is I as a user want to spend Bitcoin, right? So I want to go and use this monetary asset, and I want to purchase a good or a service. So let's say that you are Starbucks, right? I want to spend Bitcoin. Immediately, there's a couple of challenges, right? So the first is I got to have Bitcoin. Second is I got to understand how to actually transact that Bitcoin. The third is that the merchant has to be able to accept the Bitcoin, right? And then the fourth is the merchant's got to figure out, what the hell do I do with this Bitcoin? Do I leave it on my balance sheet? Do I convert it, right? Kind of like more like FX type stuff. You guys, my understanding is you've taken a very kind of nuanced approach to solving those problems. Maybe just walk us through like a transaction. Like what's technically happening when I have the Fold app, right, and I say, hey, I want to buy this cup of coffee from Starbucks. Like, what is the actual kind of technical sequence that occurs so that you solve all of those problems in that transaction?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. It's a confusing problem to solve, and you can't tackle, there are companies tackling all these different pieces. But the way that Fold's done it is, so you send Fold a payment, whether that's through your credit card or through your Bitcoin wallet. And we take the payment and convert that into prepaid credit at these merchants. And so you send us $10 and you want to spend at Amazon, we'll pull $10 of credit from Amazon down to you. And so what this essentially allows you to do is you can spend in whatever asset you want, USD or fiat, or USD, fiat, or Bitcoin, and the merchant can settle in their internal store credit. And so the merchant doesn't actually have to think about onboarding and all of these more complicated things about what it means to take custody of Bitcoin, what it means to convert it. And at a certain point, we got to figure out the exact things we're trying to solve, because it can't solve everything right now. And so we've really focused on solving the consumer side, creating an absolutely easy, simple experience to both earn it and to use it, with the idea that we start to demonstrate volume to these merchants and we start to demonstrate usage. And the one thing that Fold can do that is no other payment method can do right now is that when you use Fold, at a Target, that Fold user going through your store, from the merchant's perspective, is the only user that's not subjecting you to processing fees from Visa and MasterCard network, and has no ability for a chargeback moment. So for retailers, that's a huge benefit. It's chargebacks, processing is multi-billion-dollar headache for these merchants every year. And so what Fold allows them to do is essentially experience the possibility of what this asset could do for them, and by adopting it without going full in and actually having to build out that infrastructure. So we're essentially trying to build this case by proving out the consumer side, consumer demand, and then be able to take that to our merchant partners and start to say, okay, maybe this is time for the next stage of adoption.
And is your thought process so in that Starbucks is essentially not taking any quote unquote Bitcoin risk, right? They're not having to change out their POS system. They're not having to worry about price volatility. They don't have to have a strategy for kind of managing the Bitcoin, hedging it, transacting it, and exchanging it back to dollars, etc. But is the thought process that like that's the end game where, hey, let's let the consumers spend Bitcoin and then the retailers don't accept it? Because there's a lot of people who would say like, oh, that's not really using Bitcoin as money, right? Like that's just like, any other thing. Why don't we just use seashells and then the retailer just ends up with dollars? Or do you look at it as, no, this is the first step. Let's get one side of the transaction comfortable, familiar, excited about using this, etc., and let's solve the problem for the other side, and then eventually we can get the retailers to accept the actual Bitcoin itself, and like it's kind of like a gradual thing through the transaction, or is this the end game where only one side uses it?
This is all an evolution, and this is what Fold is creating, a product that is able to grow with the way Bitcoin is growing in its usage. And we are on the ground because we allow you to accumulate it, spend it. We actually get to see these behaviors change. About 50% of people are spending their Bitcoin rewards, 50% are saving it right now. So when we think about, where we go on the merchant side, we're going to go what makes most sense for the merchants and build for them. And so right now, settling in fiat is the only way that we're going to start to make this case to those merchants and start to have them involved in this asset. Now, where it goes in the future, we already have merchants that have approached us, and there are merchants currently today that are using it and taking on Bitcoin. Now, that's a very small minority of them. But when we start to look at where protocol development is and application development is, there are some use cases where Bitcoin can be used as an underlying asset in a retail transaction that is seamlessly in and out of fiat at different points. And that should support what the merchant's goals are, what they want to do. And so we are very close to a world where you can walk into a Target, use something like Fold with your credit card. The transaction is actually turned into a Lightning Bitcoin payment. The merchant gets to then settle in the currency of their choice, Bitcoin or whatever it is. But it's giving efficiencies to both sides. So what happens is, because the merchant no longer has processing fees and chargeback risk, they're able to push all of those rewards directly back to users to incentivize them. So the idea is aligning incentives here and how we can start to rework this. And the only way that we're going to do this is by having real world products that people are using right now in checkout lines around the country. And we get to see how behavior shifts and how it's changed and how we can tweak these incentives on both sides to kind of find the correct balance.
For sure. And I guess for you guys, part of the benefit here is it's not just Bitcoin only. Right, you can use Bitcoin, but you can also use your regular credit card, debit card, etc. through the application, and so it's a little bit more consumer friendly, right? It's not this big like, oh, I have to learn Bitcoin to use this. Fold can serve just traditional fiat payments, and so the hope then is you kind of siphon some of those people off into Bitcoin over time.
Yeah, it's about lowering the barrier to entry for both consumers and merchants to start and getting exposure to Bitcoin, and especially those that have been on the sidelines of it. So those, we figure there's about 88 million people just in the U.S. right now who want to have Bitcoin, who want to have exposure to it. But a fraction of that are people who actually have it because they're the ones going through exchanges buying it. But there are people right now who want it. It's just the ways that we're distributing it right now are turning some of them off, are just blocking some of them from engaging with it. And so it's our idea to increase the amount of ways that someone can gain exposure to it without changing any of their daily behaviors. The idea of gift cards, 93% of all Americans will use a gift card in a given year.
It's crazy.
89% of Americans are in a rewards program. So what we're doing is taking existing behaviors, existing industries that people are familiar with, comfortable with, and essentially co-opting that and imbuing it with kind of Bitcoin. And so, the idea is that you are getting adoption from people who start to say, okay, maybe I'm not there at the point where I say Bitcoin is a better money or a better dollar. But Bitcoin is for sure a better airline mile or a better reward point that's going to be debased by the company.
Yeah.
And so it's just about creating a very slow way for people to gain exposure to it, again, without changing behaviors, both on the merchant and the consumer side.
And to me, the benefit to a retailer here is I don't pay credit card transaction fees. So let's call that, anywhere between 1.5% and 3% given your size. And then I also don't have the chargeback risk. And so I don't change anything in my system. I eliminate two of my biggest headaches when it comes to payments, and my customer can still buy the exact same products. There's probably a world where some retailer could get really innovative or aggressive and say, hey, we're actually going to incentivize people to use this rather than traditional payment methods. I don't know if that's through a discount or loyalty points. There's all kinds of things that they could do. But it's almost like the retailer, once they realize the value proposition, they could actually help drive the adoption because it's better for them. This
is a huge trend in retail right now. Credit cards right now are increasing their processing fees. Really, it's 2 to 4% is really what a retailer could expect from any given transaction.
Wow.
And those are showing no signs of slowing down. So much so that you have retailers like Walmart who are creating their own POS systems to try to get around this, because right now the credit card rewards are in such a competition that credit cards are giving more and more cash back. And what's happening is that's going more and more on the retailers to actually pick up the bill. And so what's happening is these retailers now have a headache and are actively seeking alternatives. Walmart just developed one that goes through your ACH, and that's how you pay at Walmart. So we know that this is a problem that retailers are facing and that they are actively looking for alternatives. And the way that we think about this is that, it's either the Visa or MasterCard giving you your rewards back, or it's actually Walmart directly giving you your rewards back. And depending on who's controlling the payment, that's who controls the reward. And so at this point, Walmart is deeply incentivized both to eliminate chargebacks, which is a huge multi-billion-dollar issue for them. But when you're a low-margin business, processing fees quickly eat up. And so you start to think about, okay, if we can start, instead of maybe paying 2 to 3% to processing companies, and maybe we just give that exact 2 to 3% as rewards back to our own customers, suddenly we have deepened our relationship with our own existing customers. We are not beholden to rising processing fees, and we've eliminated chargebacks. And so again, it's all about not beating people over the head about what's great, Bitcoin and all. It's purely about numbers and incentives the tack that we're taking.
For sure. When you guys started the company, you actually went through a venture studio rather than raise kind of angel funding, et cetera, in the beginning. Maybe talk a little bit about that venture studio, kind of how that model works and why you guys chose to pursue that.
Yeah, so Fold came out of Thesis, which is a venture production studio. The idea is that it builds at the application layer and protocol layer on top of Bitcoin specifically, but works on some other protocols as well. And the idea is there's a lot of knowledge that can be shared across projects, especially at such an early stage of the industry where the idea of being able to harvest as much learnings, share UX ideas and thoughts across a broad base of use cases allows you to excel much faster. And so the idea is that Thesis was created to launch these use cases, to test these ideas. Can we change the way people accumulate Bitcoin? Let's not think about the exchange. Can we create and co-opt the idea of rewards and payments and create that as a whole new channel that benefits consumers and merchants? Okay, let's go test that. And so we launch product into the market, we get immediate feedback, and we see where that idea is going. Is there immediate traction? Because the idea is we're not building for the next, a product that will work in 20 years, 10 years. We're building for products that are businesses today. And so the benefit of a venture model like this is that we actually get the freedom to test this in a market that right now is super nascent, and that we get to kind of battle harden before we go all in for venture that may not lead to a spot that we want to. And we're here to dedicate our lives to this. So we want to make sure the projects we're working on are are solid, have promise, and actually have somewhere to deliver value today.
Would it be fair to say the venture model or venture studio model has less pressure in the beginning? So it's more of a kind of experimentation and testing than if you went out, raised capital, and like, we have to make this work?
The only way a venture model works is if you actually have people committed who have either been entrepreneurs previously and have a direct use case they want to test, or they have brought products to market. Or it works when you actually have an idea that already has traction, and that you can just kind of add a little bit more fuel on the fire and see where you can go for next year. And so it is one of the things that doesn't work in all contexts. Like, it's not right for everybody, because the most important thing is to have skin in the game. And so the way that we built the thesis model is that every lead of a vertical, so myself, I'm running Fold, has skin in the game. Like, that is your project. If that project is not there, then we'll maybe there's another thing that you can go do. But the idea is that you are very deeply committed, as if you are raising funding for this. And essentially, instead of getting a larger angel or seed, it's much smaller amounts, so that you can have a place and kind of a laboratory to test this. And you do it in much smaller time frames. We're talking under 6 months. And then from there, once that's validated, then you can spin out, go look at seed. And that's what Fold has done. We just announced our seed funding with some incredible partners in the space back in October.
Tell us a little bit more about that, right? So you guys had used the venture studio model, kind of tested a bunch, figured out, hey, there's some traction here. We think that this has got some legs to it. What was kind of the decision making to spin out? Like, were there certain milestones you were looking for, or was it more of just, hey, we're gonna have to raise outside capital and like really go put a full effort behind this? And so that was the driver.
Yeah, I mean, it's first of all proving at a base level, is there a path to a sustainable business here? Are we going to bring on partners where we know that we have a very good idea of how to make this into a business today, and change and execute on our larger vision for tomorrow and the years after? And so for us, it was really important to make sure we came in with proof points that just were able to be blatantly obvious for any of these partners to bring on. Okay, you say that you can change behaviors and create a new way for people to earn Bitcoin. Okay, let us know what the numbers are. How many people are doing this? How many have done that? How much are they earning? What are they doing? What are they spending it on? Okay, you say that layer 2 Lightning is going to be the future of Bitcoin retail payments. Prove us that. Well, we launched Lightning Pizza to be like, okay, we're going to prove that we're going to launch a real world service on top of Lightning, and show that not only that can Lightning handle transactions that aren't, a couple Satoshis, but $25, $50, and launch that on a nationwide service that anyone can use. We launched Lightning Pizza.
Explain what that is.
So Lightning Pizza was a layer over Domino's Pizza that allowed Lightning payments. So essentially, Domino's built on Lightning. So anybody could use the Lightning Network to have Domino's Pizza delivered to them, order it in store, and essentially it gave you all the ability to interact with a real world service nationwide. See, hey, are these users just in a pocket of New York or San Francisco? Well, we launched it and found that nearly every state in the country had activity in ordering Domino's Pizza over the Lightning Network.
I just love the name Lightning Pizza, because it was Lightning Network, but also lightning fast in terms of getting the pizza to your door.
It worked in all the ways. I mean, right now, Lightning Pizza for us was like an experiment, a project to figure out, not only internally for us, is Lightning at a mature enough level to actually launch a real world service, but it was also about resurrecting the meme of Bitcoin and pizza again, and to see, okay, we're at a different point in Bitcoin development and protocol development. Layer 2 is finally here. Let's see if the pizza use case can actually work now. And so we launched that. We had thousands of orders in the first days after this. We didn't even know how many people had Lightning wallets. So, shout out to Blue Wallet. About 75-80% of all orders came from Blue Wallet, custodial solution. But it also proved, lowering the barrier to entry into these wallets was an important thing. Now, long term, is that where we want to be? We'll figure that out. But the idea was that right now, Lightning can provide a base payment layer for real world services, and it can work without breaking.
Yeah. And as you guys built this, one, it was just cool to see the community kind of rally around it, right? I think it was just kind of a cool thing. A lot of it had to do with the pizza and Bitcoin memes, but also it worked, right? And so you could actually go on and use it. Talk to me more about the Lightning Network itself, though, right? Like, there's a lot of different things that you could overlay on, the Domino's APIs and their website and say, hey, use XYZ different payment method. Like, why the Lightning Network, and kind of give me an understanding of like how you guys see the state of where we are.
Yeah, it was interesting. I just went to the first Lightning conference in Berlin about a month ago, and it was one of those great moments for a kind of state of the union, state of affairs about where we are in the space. And I have to say, I've been blown away by the speed of development where we've come in the last year alone with where we are at Lightning. And so, number one, there's a validated large developer community focused on this. So that's, when we talk about building new protocols, one of the most important metrics is the developer community and activity, people dedicating their work towards it. And it was plainly obvious how many people are there building on various use cases for what Lightning can be: messaging on top of Lightning, payments, instant settlement for trading, decentralized exchanges, all of these various things. And so for us, we've chosen to explore Lightning from our perspective of retail and adoption. And so the best part about the Berlin conference was that it was both a celebration of all these different use cases and how far we've come, but also a sober look at just what challenges are there. And by no means is this production ready. Domino's is ready to take this on as their primary payment system. We don't expect that to be that for a little bit. So for us, the benefits that we see going forward with Lightning are essentially three things. It's instantaneous settlement, which has implications both for retailers and businesses, to be the idea that you can settle and have your money on your books that you can spend on new inventory, new marketing, and have that capital just ready to deploy, which right now you're waiting a couple weeks to do, which changes how you do business. It has implications on the trading and exchange side of instant final settlement. There's great talks. Jack Mallers just has done a great one about really how revolutionary instantaneous settlement of Bitcoin actually is. And so there's the instant settlement. There's also bringing Bitcoin to low fees, so down to a couple Satoshis there, which opens up a bunch more use cases: micropayments, streaming payments. The thing is that Lightning is not just about replacing an incumbent payment system. It's about fundamentally changing the fundamentals of what a payment system can be that are far beyond the capabilities of what we currently have today. Already it's demonstrated use cases that are just not possible from an existing credit card transaction or any other payment system we had. And so we really are looking at Lightning for those competitive advantages and how we can leverage those to take advantage of existing problems, like we just mentioned, the rising processing fees, chargebacks. How do we take the things that Lightning can bring and no other payment system can do, and how do we start to introduce those to the people that need it most?
Mm-hmm. And the Lightning Network itself, I think one of the big kind of knocks on it right now from the not even detractors as much just the skeptics maybe, is, oh, you can't really put a bunch of Bitcoin through the system. It doesn't work. It's not as fast as promised, all this kind of stuff. Like, the one I'd focus on the most, I think, is the probably most realistic detraction is you can't put a lot of throughput today, right? So we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but maybe just describe like why that is today and explain kind of how that's been a self-imposed thing, more from like a safety of the network versus technically it's not possible.
Yeah. This is absolutely a hard cap that's been imposed by the protocol development, and for good reason. This is a fledgling network, and it relies on robust participants in there that can route payments. Hop to Pomp to me, to someone else, a pump can figure out a settlement. That requires a network that has enough critical mass to be able to enable seamless payments that you can count on 99% of the time. Now, when you have an early network, you just don't have the network participation yet. Now, Lightning has been growing and is very quickly going to be on track to get there. But in these early days, it's not. And so the idea is self-imposed a ceiling on how much a given transaction can be. Right now, I believe it's around $400 with where we are at with Bitcoin and Lightning. So provides some problems when people want to buy airline tickets through Fold. But it's for good reason. It's number one, keeping real expectations real, not over-promising, which is a hallmark of other crypto projects in this space, and just about being a way that we can both take users on now, introduce them to Lightning without putting them at risk. And so all of the issues with channel capacity, transaction size, and even just the tooling to support a Lightning node, things like this, and manage that, those are all active solutions that are incoming. There's AMP, which is going to allow you to break payments into much smaller payments and route that as your payment. So there's new tooling out there that just makes spinning up a node, managing it much easier and simple, so you're not losing any money. And so the idea is, right now, there's really been no major case of any major loss of funds, which to me is incredibly surprising, given how much activity and commerce is actually going on the Lightning Network right now. And so a lot of these are self-imposed, and they are because we know the solutions. We know generally when they'll come, and when they will, we'll start to see those self-imposed limits start to relax.
Because what the Lightning Network is 18, maybe 24 months old.
In terms of, I mean, when does it start? From a paper or from the first kind of release? I'd say a good benchmark is 18 to 24 months. I think that's right, when people actually started to really build on this as a production environment.
And so, given where we are today, like, there's actually been pretty good progress, right? There's thousands of nodes, and kind of people have really built a number of wallets. There's been tens of thousands of people who have adopted it and started using it, and there's been applications built like Lightning Pizza, and so again, is it Visa today? No, of course not, right? But in 2 years or less, it's pretty incredible, the progress, especially given that it is done by kind of a loosely coordinated group of individuals on the internet that have built this global product that's going after some of the largest settlement networks in the world.
Yeah, it has been incredible to be a part of and to see, and so. We have not only seen massive explosive growth in it, but we've also seen, there was a moment where a couple headlines saying, the amount of active nodes has gone down for a while, or the amount of fees has gone down. So is the network healthy? And actually, it was a sign of maturity for this network, that people are getting smarter about how to manage funds, how to have more efficient infrastructure, so that it can start to move to the next level. And so we're only going to see more and more use cases developed on top of it. There's some incredible stuff of USD to Lightning invoices, which essentially opens up the possibility that anybody currently with a credit card or bank account could be spending at retailers, at an exchange with their USD, but it is actually being settled as a Bitcoin payment, so that on both sides it's instantly settled on the side protecting the actual receiver, but it doesn't require any behavioral change from the actual initiator of the payment.
And this would be US dollars into the system, converted to Bitcoin across the Lightning Network, converted back to US dollars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it could be converted back to US dollars. It could be settled and kept in a Lightning channel. The idea is that you're really leveraging some of the, again, competitive advantages that Lightning and Bitcoin just present that the incumbent world does not offer. There's nothing like it, and the only way is to actually shoot actual gold to someone at the speed of light and then have it settled as in that way. There's just really no support in any of this infrastructure yet, and so the things that I'm most interested are really exposing and going right after these competitive advantages that just are not offered, that provide huge savings, efficiencies, and other benefits for both consumers and merchants, traders, all, speculators. And the cool thing is that the Lightning community is developing on all of these use cases right now. And so Lightning is going to make trading better. Lightning will make paying better. Lightning will make hodling better. Like, there are a ton of things that just is all in service of essentially adding more value to the base chain. And this is, again, like, we talk about in a decade, is Lightning going to be it? We're betting it will. We know it will happen in some layer 2 solutions, so there could be a world where another protocol is developed, but right now there is no reason to believe that Lightning won't be that solution right now.
The idea of going from US dollars across the Lightning Network and back into dollars, it almost makes the dollar transactions non-censorable US dollar transactions, right? Which is a pretty interesting thing to think about, where things like the Lightning Network or the Bitcoin network can change the way that even fiat holders interact with money and the financial system.
It provides an instantaneous bridge for the currencies that people currently hold, whatever that may be, any type of fiat, US dollars, euros, and creates a way for essentially an atomic swap into any other currency around the world. And so it's not just US dollars, but it is any currency. It is any asset that Lightning can facilitate instantaneous settlements between different actors around the globe transacting in different currencies with zero conversion fees on both sides.
And so obviously the Visas, the MasterCards, and the legacy banking system, like, that's a pretty big threat to what they're doing. Fold obviously could be a large threat to some of the payment incumbents as well. Anything that you've seen there in terms of how kind of the market's responded to what you guys have built so far?
So I can tell you that these incumbents are paying attention. We are actively in communication with a couple of those networks that you just mentioned, and we know that they are not only paying attention, but they're running their own experiments. And so for us, we see what the technology we're developing could be something that threatens their business model, but we're also seeing them start to build. Now, I don't think they're going to be able to build as fast or as intelligently as people who have skin in the game, who are with their ears to the ground and really leveraging and having no essentially incumbent business model to protect. So I do know that they are thinking about this, and I will say I think in 2020 we're going to hear about some partnerships that are going to involve incumbents and start to directly introduce them indirectly to these a Lightning Network and other developments.
For sure. And, look, it's starting, I think reporters are getting smarter about asking these people these questions. Yesterday, the news broke that the PayPal CEO, he owns Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
And he only owns Bitcoin. And some of that is probably, hey, I want to see what this is all about and learning and experimenting. Some of that's, I'm a believer, right? And so it's interesting to see that. Another aspect that I find really interesting about Fold that maybe the incumbents have a different approach is around privacy, right? And so the incumbents have historically been very susceptible to data breaches, cybersecurity attacks, etc. You guys are taking a different model as to how to protect consumers. Maybe describe a little bit about what the incumbents' challenges are, and then how you guys are solving that.
Yeah, I mean, historically, Fold has been working in the checkout lines of these major retailers for a while now, so we understand that. We're also a company that comes from the Bitcoin world, and so there are certain values from Bitcoiners and those that are wanting to use a product like Fold that they want to see in the product. And the interesting thing is those values present some incredible opportunities for consumers worldwide. So you think about when you go swipe your credit card at a merchant, your location, your name, your transaction details, your payment details are all then given to the store, your bank, the store's bank, the payment processor, any rewards program that you're using, and maybe you're using a financial planning app like a Mint or something. And so that one transaction is then being distributed, all of that data across to all of these different actors who have varying levels of security and commitment to actually protecting your data. And almost all of them are licensed to resell that data to who knows who. And so the idea is that it's we're living in a world where our data is just freely given in a world where 50% of retailers are compromised every single year. Hundreds of millions of Americans' data is compromised in these acts, and so this leads to huge issues with fraud and has real impacts on credit scores that can have real impacts when you're not taking a more private, secure approach to these types of transactions. And so what Fold has done is not just use Bitcoin in payments and rewards, but it's taking the ethos and the values of Bitcoin and also providing that to payments and rewards. And the way that we're doing that is essentially ensuring that when you use Fold at a retailer, you are not leaking any of that data to them. You are the retailer is only seeing a payment from Fold, and your credit card only sees that you're paying Fold. And so it makes it pseudonymous, so you're not tied to the things that you purchase, so advertisers can be overly targeting, and you're not, for the most part, you're not leaking your private and transaction details that can be susceptible to attackers and advertisers alike.
Do you think that will eventually force the traditional payment systems to be more worried about privacy and they'll move to these models, or do you feel like they have to stick with the model they have because of the kind of the innovator's dilemma?
Yeah, I think it's that. If there's any trend that you can see over the last couple decades, is that the more data that you can suck up from your consumers, the bit larger company you're going to be more successful. And that's just what we've seen in the business models. The number one purchaser of this purchasing data at point of sale is Google. The reason why they're doing this is trying to create that full picture of what you're searching to what you're buying, and ultimately create better ads for you, more targeted ads. And so we know that the trend has been overwhelmingly to get as much data from consumers as possible. But what that has also done, it hasn't seen at the same time secure infrastructure that's being built to make sure that data is protected and stored correctly. And what happens is that the pendulum has just swung far too much to one side, so much so that these retailers now are so susceptible to these hacks that there's overwhelming evidence that when consumers' data is compromised and a given store is named in that is named as the kind of culprit of where that data was compromised, users don't go back to that store upwards of 6 months. It actually changes their spending behavior, which is a huge hit to a lot of these companies. And we're only seeing these types of compromises accelerate. And so I think very much so that this is on their radar about, number one, we need to be better at what we do with data. Number two, companies like Apple are coming out about protection and privacy, making these overtures of saying, hey, we're going to win more business ultimately when we put the customer first. And so I think the narrative is starting to change. Now, how fast that does depends on how fast companies like Fold and others in the space that are doing things like this grow.
When you look out 10, 20 years, what's your kind of vision for where the Lightning Network goes? What does it become?
I think the Lightning Network, what we're already seeing, an interesting thing is the use cases are diversifying. There's messaging being built on unstoppable messaging being built on unstoppable money. We're seeing people release stable coins and interoperability on the Lightning Network. And essentially it is this network that allows instantaneous settlement across parties interacting on this network in a way that has implications for wide amount of use cases that will affect people, in many ways in their lives. So what I'm looking at it from is that This is a way, as Bitcoin grows in an asset, as Bitcoin is more widely distributed, more holders are there, as the idea of how to use Bitcoin starts to settle and it becomes more of an asset that people are holding, but not only that, are being more and more incentivized to use in their daily life, that Lightning Network will become the way that that is used. I think that the majority of people being onboarded into Bitcoin in the next 5 years are probably going to be onboarded through layer 2 as opposed to going on chain. And so I think number one, the most obvious thing is that it's going to change how people experience Bitcoin for the first time. It is going to be the layer that people are onboarded directly into, and it's going to be the layer in which provides a user experience that is at the level, if not beyond, what they expect from existing incumbent options. And so I think it will soon be at a point where mainstream consumers could be interacting with the Lightning Network and not even know it. And this could be in the context of, again, trading, retail payments, anything.
Yeah. It's super interesting to think through kind of where we're going, right? Understanding what the challenges are today. Same question, but for Fold. Like, where do you see it 10, 20 years from now?
So with Fold, we want to introduce, Bitcoin to mainstream people. We want to make Bitcoin accessible and
to
rewarding.
Regular people who aren't down the rabbit hole yet.
Yes, and then be the vehicle to drive them down that rabbit hole.
Yep.
And so for us, we are committed to the growth of this asset class in general. We are supporting and here to support the values that the base protocol is already presenting to the world and accelerate that through mass adoption. And so for Fold, we not only hope to change how people are paying and being rewarded, but we also hope to change how we think of those systems overall, about a focus on how do we have a payment processor that's not built on fees? How do we have a reward system that's not built on data harvesting? How do we take not just Bitcoin and apply that to payments and rewards, but the ethos, the values of it? And so what I would hope for Fold is that we are giving the same amount of value that people may see today from using and transacting in the ways that they do, but we're keeping them safer while doing it. We're putting the consumer first, and we are enriching them, rewarding them more than they ever have in the past. And so for us, it's not just about bringing and putting Bitcoin in people's pockets, but bringing the values that we've learned from this asset that this community has developed and rallied around, and put that at the very core of these behaviors and institutions that historically haven't put that first.
Yeah. It's taking a long-term view, and you said it earlier, it's putting the customer first, right? And it's understanding that if we do right by the people who use our products, then over a long period of time, they'll remain loyal. We'll build a sustainable business around it. We'll align in a win-win situation. And if you do that for long enough, everyone else kind of, the flash in the pans come and go, right? And you're kind of the last person standing, but you're also the largest player, and it's a pretty tried and true method, but it takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I've been an entrepreneur building, products for a while, and what I found is that it is a whole new game when you're building, not just building a business, 'cause that's hard enough for anybody, but when you're building a business in a space like this that is also growing, that is also nascent, that there's multiple levels now that there's extra levels that you're now having to think about and pay attention to, macro events around the world that could directly affect how your product works in a day-to-day retail transaction for somebody. And so for me, it's really the only way to create a sustainable Bitcoin business is to look long-term. But right now is to deliver the right incentives and unit economics today. And so it's a challenge to both have this long-term vision of where you want to be and all the things you want to change, while building a business that delivers value today.
For sure. Before we wrap up, I always ask a rapid fire set of questions. What do you think is the most important company in Bitcoin or crypto other than Fold?
I would say right now, Cash App is it has done an incredible job at introducing new people to the idea of Bitcoin in a Trojan horse capacity that is, taking the idea of, the old Venmo send and receive, and then having Bitcoin front and center there. And not only that, having a commitment to educating people about the asset as well.
Do you think that Cash App goes outside of just send, receive, buy, and hold? Are there other things that they could do?
Oh, absolutely. I think
If you're Jack, what do you do?
if you're Jack, you take it slow, like he has been.
It's pretty incredible.
It is. I mean, and I say take it slow, and actually, you look at that. You look at any other companies, in fact, doing this very quickly.
Yeah.
But I would say you continue to take it slow. You are the main benefit that you can bring to the space is provide a simple, accessible on-ramp for those to get involved in the space. And then from there, you'll introduce them to a whole world of people like Fold, developing new use cases and value for that. But right now, the most important thing is to create an easy and safe way to onboard people into this asset. Change the way that people have been historically onboarded into it.
Yeah, it's there's a saying in the military that is slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? And I think that's like the perfect kind of quote for what Square's done.
Absolutely.
Is they've just been very deliberate about every action. They've made good decisions. They haven't chased things. My favorite is when he gets asked, are you going to create a crypto? And he always responds with hell no.
Yeah.
Right? Not no, but hell no.
Yep.
What's the one regulation that you would change or improve if you could?
Oh man, this is an easy one for me.
Okay.
The current tax implications of spending Bitcoin. The idea that people are exposed to capital gains and the reporting is onerous. It is single-handedly hampering a massive use case of what Bitcoin could be. And I do believe if that was changed, the narrative about what Bitcoin could do and how much it could grow would drastically change. Now, I would say that there are technological solutions that are coming on the horizon that are going to, whether the regulation comes or not, will help push that forward. But that alone would be an incredible help for the space.
For sure. What's the most controversial thought you have in all of Bitcoin? You believe it and everyone else is going to disagree with you.
That hyper Bitcoinization is a wonderful idea, but I do believe it will always, one of the benefits of real benefit of Bitcoin is providing a counterbalance to the existing financial system that we have, and that instead of entirely replacing, it will live alongside and provide a level of balance, control, counterweight that will ultimately allow the benefits that can be brought from both sides and allow them to coexist.
Do they coexist in silos forever, or is there kind of like a merging into a new system that takes the benefits of both?
I think there's a merging, but what it does is provides fundamental controls on especially the world that we live in now, and MMT and quantitative easing and money printing. It provides a check on that, almost like a balance of power that will make sure that the pendulum doesn't swing as far as we've seen it, and gets us into this kind of constant crisis mode that we're currently living in.
Yeah. What's the most important book you've ever read?
Most important book I've ever read. Oh man, let's see. I mean, my favorite, I think one of the most recent books that I have read was Mutual Aid.
What's that?
It's a book by this guy named Murray Bookchin, and it's suggesting that the way that people evolve and develop and societies develop is not through this idea of kind of ruthless competition, me over you, but it's actually when incentives align to have cooperation over wide groups of people, that is not about the winner takes all. That the real progress happens when incentives and culture is able to align in a way that is about mutually benefiting each other in a society. And it's really rare and hard to get that, and we've only seen it happen a couple times. But what I love about that is it shows so much about where we are in this space. What essentially Bitcoin has done has been an incredible way to align incentives over a broad, diverse group of people in a way that I think is ultimately going to be enriching for everyone.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. What's the worst book you've ever read? Like, what's a book you read that you're just like, that sucked?
I read. This book didn't suck, but I think just to be provide kind of a contrarian opinion, like *Sapiens*, I think is
not impressed.
I mean, for how much play it got,
Yeah.
I think, but it was fun. I think I took a lot of things from it, but it was just one of those when you look at the hype and you're there, it's very easy to be like, I think we went a little overboard on this.
It's a safe answer when people say, like, what book have you read recently? By saying that, it brings a lot of like, you must be intellectual.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Sure. Aliens, speaking of *Sapiens*, believer, non-believer?
This is one of my favorite questions that you ask, partly because I actually spent a couple weeks at the SETI Institute.
Oh, man, let's go. All right. So spill the beans.
So I don't know if you know, but Jodie Foster, who was in Contact, right? I spent about a couple weeks with the actual Jodie Foster, the real life Jodie Foster, who Carl Sagan wrote the book about.
Wow.
Up at the Hat Creek Observatory in Northern California. Mm-hmm. And it's SETI. It's in the middle of nowhere. You drive out there. It takes several hours to get there. Cell service cuts out. Suddenly radio, it's only some apocalyptic preacher, and then that starts to cut out, and then it's radio silence. And that's why they've chosen this area. Mm-hmm. And so you go there, and it's just a group of scientists come up there. They started in the 70s and now was funded by one of the Microsoft guys. Mm-hmm. And they have been on the forefront of looking for radio pulses around the universe.
And SETI searched for extraterrestrial intelligence?
Exactly.
Is that what it is? Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is based out in California, but there are installations everywhere, and it's actually a place that has historically been funded, publicly funded. But there was a time when I think it was a Republican senator came out and said, "Look at all these Democrats in California funding, looking for aliens and spending all your tax money." So it kind of dampened the system for a while. That's
a pretty good sell to the people,
it was
right?
Genius. It's the easiest thing you could have done. And so that actually generated a lot of private interest in it. See, this is when you got a lot of the Microsoft guys in there, and it's kind of created a resurgence in this search. And so I went up there. We started to increase the radio bandwidths of which you could search from, because you're looking through this what's called the trough, the specific radio bandwidth that you can listen most clearly as widely as possible. And we were working on that, and I got to just see these guys working and just hanging out, went out for drinks and just got to just be embedded with them. And so
Why'd you go?
Because I was writing a story on them. I was up there and had been, I was a journalist in my past. So I went up there, and they have this thing in the back of closet. They have this big refrigerator. It's super dusty on top, but you open it, it's full of champagne.
Interesting.
And that champagne
is being saved?
Is being saved for that day.
Wow.
And so there's this interesting, you talk about subculture, Bitcoin has an interesting subculture. SETI also has an interesting subculture.
Yeah. What were the biggest surprises? So you're going up there, right? You get embedded with people who are literally searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. So you already kind of probably have some preconceived notions, etc. But what was the biggest surprise?
I mean, I went up there thinking I would, see this dark room with all of these beeping lights and just spatial maps happening and a lot of energy, and it's really just a bunch of people sitting in super drab office. Nothing sexy about it, for hours on end, just working to make the most minute of improvements. And it's a similar thing. It's a major project. It's one of the only scientific fields that you can dedicate yourself to that has seen no measure of progress. Mm-hmm. Yet they still have dedicated their lives to it.
There was a gentleman who came on the podcast, and he said every human has two questions at some point in their life. One is, what happens after death? And two is, are we here alone?
Yep.
Right. And the "are we here alone" is actually the one that hasn't become religious, right? The what happens after death is much more of a religious question. But the "are we here alone" is much more scientific. And the part that amazes me is you bring together so many intelligent people, and they think and believe so many different things. They literally argue and they will tell you, we've never been in contact. There's no radio waves. There's no anything. And that same person will turn around, but let me show you this, piece of material that we can't explain.
Yep.
Right. And so it's interesting. But to me, the part that I always go back to is it would be one of the greatest scientific breakthroughs of our life is the person or the group that contacts or identifies extraterrestrial life. And mathematically, there's a very high probability that it's out there. Do you think with the time you spent there, this is more of we might not have the tools to actually be able to probe far enough? Or is this there's so much like herd mentality, everyone's looking at it the same way, and we just may be wrong in our approach so far?
Yeah, I think we are. One of the things I learned is how actually limited we are. It's really cool to see when again, there's so many parallels to Bitcoin community and space. Like the promise of what it could be massive. But when you actually start talking to the builders and the people there, they're very realistic about the challenges and that they have to overcome and the limitations that they have.
Very rational.
Very rational. And you have to be that way, but also you have to have that split mind like you just talked about of also keeping an eye on the larger vision. And so I kind of am at the thing where right now our tools seem like they are so very limited to do this, where we would have been approached farther if there was an advanced civilization. And so the best bet that we can be thinking about now is finding a civilization that is less advanced than us, and even at a kind of microbial level, if anything. And so it's one of those things where they're both preparing for linguistically how to speak to extraterrestrials when they get here, but also knowing that maybe they should be tooling their tools for looking for lower stage civilizations as well.
That's incredible to hear that not only is SETI looking for extraterrestrials, but they're also preparing what happens if they come here.
Oh, yeah. Follow Seth Shostak. He's also he's one of the guys that all the Hollywood films go to, but I think at one point his title was like head of extraterrestrial communications or linguistics or something.
Pretty badass name.
It is. Absolutely. If you could aspire to any title, I think that guy's one.
I might just change my fucking title to that right now.
Actually, you speaking to the airways like this could make sense. And this group is incredibly smart. They are, most of them are out of Stanford. There's a lot over here on the East Coast, but the lifestyle is actually really great. There's Arecibo in Puerto Rico. There's Hat Creek up in Northern California. There's a couple over here in Greensboro, and there's some in Hawaii. They're hopping to these incredible locales, on the hunt for aliens, but living a good life while they're at it.
Yeah, it's the one thing that fascinates me is just odds are they're out there.
Yep.
Are we going to find them? Are they going to find us? And then knowing they're there, kind of identifying this as fact is a big deal. But then obviously being able to interact is the part I'm personally most interested in. And my fascination with this all started with one simple question, which is, do you think that aliens have pets?
I'd have to say yes. I would absolutely have to say yes. And maybe hopefully we don't become their pets in the future and they find a new pet shop here. I would like it to maybe be the other way around.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for a hard yes on that.
It feels like it's the part of the aliens no one ever talks about, right? Because we all think like the little green man showing up, but like, is he rolling up with, pets or is he coming alone? Awesome. What one question do you have for me to finish up?
So, you have builders coming up here and they're all shilling their own projects. Where do you feel is the most exciting new development in the space coming from? Like what right now is like, we know that it's speculation, all that, but like what is a new kind of take or insight that you have that you're paying attention to?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer this probably not the way you want me to, but it's a non-technical thing. And it's the time elapsing that allows for the legitimization of Bitcoin. And what I mean by that is, 11 years ago, white paper gets published to most of the world, they would say, quote unquote nerds. And they're, cryptographic experts. They're people who are kind of on the fringes of society for the most part. It's not like CNN was covering the, cryptography mailing list, right?
Yep.
Type thing. Today, this year in 2019, we've seen the president tweet about it. We've seen Congress and Senate hold multiple hearings. We've seen congressmen who literally have said, on the congressional floor, you can't stop Bitcoin. It's unstoppable, right?
That was amazing.
Yeah, you see, and the two to me that get, probably not enough credit are Warren Davidson and Patrick McHenry, right? Like, I mean, they're full on Bitcoiners. Like they see the future, they get it, they're behind it, etc. You see countries even like China, right, Russia, Venezuela, right, that are again approaching this as not a question of, hey, is this going to be a thing? And more a question of like, what are we going to do when this thing is a thing?
Yep.
Right. And so to me, like that's been the big leap over the last 2 years is it went from like, oh, what are you like crazy people on the internet doing? Like, the Reddit community, they've got some new thing. I don't know. They got Bitcoin, they got Dogecoin, right? Now there's been like a true separation, I think, in the legitimacy of, oh, Bitcoin's real, right? Like the president tweeted about it. And there's probably still a lot of questions and kind of like maybe it's a thing, maybe it's not with everything else. Like when I talk to institutional investors, they don't talk about anything other than Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like and some of it's they don't know, right? So they actually don't even know the names of other things or to ask about them. And some of it's just like in their mind, Bitcoin is like the most legitimate thing that they could put in their portfolios, and so they're trying to understand it. So to me, like that's been the biggest development. What I don't know is like how much farther can it go, right? Like, yeah, there's like some big things like, a central bank puts it in their reserves, or where a country says it's a recognized reserve currency. Two countries start like trading and settling in Bitcoin, right? Like there's some of these like big moments.
Yep.
Maybe a country comes out and says, hey, we just put $2 billion into an energy project to mine Bitcoin, like that type of stuff. Those are like, I still think pretty far away. I don't think that stuff's going to happen tomorrow. But, look, I've been told by multiple people around the world who, would be in the know. There's many countries that are mining Bitcoin, right? And all this kind of stuff. Again, it's just like every day, it's like 1% improvement, right? Or 1% more legitimate. And then you look back and, we're 11 years in and you're like, hey, man, like CNBC can't get enough of this, right?
True.
And like now they're talking about price, right? And so they're not talking necessarily about the things that, around adoption or things that you guys are working on, et cetera. But price then gets to, well, what are people actually doing with it? Which gets to mining, which then gets to adoption, which, I'm waiting for, well, who's the first news station that reports during earnings season the Bitcoin transaction volume for the last, 3 months and compares it to Venmo, PayPal, Apple Pay, everything else. Like to me, that's where you get a really, really interesting dynamic, because now it's not just, hey, Bitcoin as an asset, it's Bitcoin as a payment product is reaching mainstream.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of like that whole thought process or conscious stream is something I'm paying a lot of attention to, because I think it's really, really important because it elicits the capital into the system to let everyone go build.
I couldn't agree more. There's been a palpable shift this year, I believe, in that way. And yeah, let's get back to building, minting new Bitcoiners. I mean, part of what we are here at Fold is also, it's not just about getting more people with Bitcoin, but it's about establishing an electorate of people with Bitcoin that have those values, defend it in the public sphere, and slowly and then all at once,
Absolutely. Where can people go find more about Fold or find you on the internet?
So Fold's available Android App Store. You can find us at foldapp.com. And you can always reach out to me if you're ever having any issues, have some feature requests. I'm at WLRVS. Give me a shout, and we are building for you all. So don't be a stranger.
Go download the app. All right, man. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
It's been good.